What's it like having used an S23 Ultra for over a year? Is it still worth picking up? Any pros and cons? Well, that's what I'm here to answer in this video. The display on Samsung's flagships has always been one of its greatest strengths, with the S23 being no exception. 1440p, 120Hz, vibrant and punchy colors. But the thing that impressed me the most was just how bright the screen gets. When using the adaptive brightness setting, the screen gets so bright to the point of actually being bright, even outdoors with the sun beaming down on it. I never had any issue with my old Galaxy S10 not getting bright enough, but this just makes my S10 look like child's play by comparison. The screen also adjusts its refresh rate depending on what you're doing to save on battery. For example, if you're watching a 30 FPS YouTube video, the screen will switch to 30 Hz. Or, when using the S Pen, the screen will ramp up to 120 Hz, as you see right there. Though, something I feel the need to mention is that this screen only goes down to as low as 24 Hz, whether you're in the home screen or the always-on display, even though it should be capable of going down to as low as 1 Hz. This is something that makes absolutely no sense, given that Samsung has this hardware feature that is capable of saving extra power, so why don't they just take advantage of it? Especially when you consider that the launch price of this phone was close to $1,200. I'm also not a fan of the curved display due to how much harder it is to find a case, any screen protector, at least a good one, combined with the fact that I don't see any benefit to having it at all, which makes me all the more happy that Samsung ditched it with the S24 Ultra, and I hope they don't ever return to this useless gimmicky feature. Despite my complaints, this is still an excellent display that I don't think you should have any problems with. And the camera is very good too. So generally, you know what you can expect with Samsung's flagship cameras. Bright, vibrant, colorful pictures, great video with unlimited 4K 60, some of the best that you can get in an Android phone. Just some things I thought I'd share my opinion on. The first is the 200 megapixel main camera sensor, which sounds impressive on paper, but as we all know, megapixels aren't everything. When I tried the 200 megapixel mode, it was hit and miss. When it worked really well. I could zoom into a photo, and you couldn't see a single pixel. Other times though, not so much. It didn't look as detailed as a 12 megapixel mode, even in good lighting, and in anything less than that, even less so. And I thought the 50 megapixel mode would have been the perfect middle ground between resolution and pixel size, but that was hit and miss too, so I just stuck with the 12 megapixel mode for the entire time. But that doesn't mean that the 200 megapixels are entirely useless. The benefit to this is something called pixel binning, where you take a higher number of total pixels and combine them into one larger pixel. We already saw this happen with the S20 to the S22 Ultra, where the 108 megapixel camera took 9 pixels and made one giant pixel, still creating a 12 megapixel picture, but a much sharper one than without the pixel binning. The S23 and S24 Ultra do something similar, but instead of combining 9 pixels, they combine 16, landing you with a very sharp 12.5 megapixel shot. The second thing I wanted to talk about is zoom. So the S23 Ultra has 2 zoom cameras, a telephoto camera at 3x optical zoom and a periscope camera at 10x optical zoom. The zoom is crazy good on this phone in most conditions. Whether you're in broad daylight or in a dimly lit room using night mode, you can still count on the telephoto or periscope camera to capture very colorful, vibrant, and still detailed shots. Seriously, just look at some of these results. I'd say the 30x is the farthest you should zoom because it still looks pretty decent, but anything after that is just going to lose more and more detail and clarity, and the 100x zoom is basically useless. The third thing I thought I'd mention is the ultra-wide camera, as there's a lot of improvements made in this area compared to when I last tested it using my Galaxy S10 Plus. First is how much closer in quality it is to the main and telephoto camera, even in harsher lighting conditions. It's not perfect, as you can see the colors still don't look as consistent as the other two, but it's still so much better than it was before. Some complaints I have are how choppy it is to switch between lenses, as you can see right here, and noisy video in low light. Switching lenses has been resolved on the S24 lineup, where now it's almost as smooth as the iPhone, but the same can't be said for video. Don't just take my word for it. There's other videos showing the S23 and even the S24 Ultra struggling with low light video. I'll put some down in the description below. But that doesn't mean that the video is entirely bad altogether. It's just not very good in low light. But in daytime, or in a well-lit area like the desk that I'm filming on right now, it's great. There's plenty of detail, things pop with vibrance and color and contrast similar to the photos, and stabilization and dynamic range are excellent. Great video is only half of the story, of course, with the other half being great audio, and thankfully the S23 does not disappoint. What I really appreciate about Galaxy phones in general is how well Samsung cuts out the background noise. Whenever there's a lot of it, Samsung is a little aggressive with it, but for any minor background noise being cut out, it does a great job, making the video look and sound very smooth, making your voice the central part of the video. There's a lot to like with Samsung software, but also some things I don't like about it, so I'll get that out of the way before I get to the good stuff. Samsung including 2 versions of literally everything Google makes just gets in the way of using the phone. For example, I want to save my logins using Google Smart Lock, but I have to use Samsung Smart Pass instead. I don't care about Bixby, never have, never will, and that's about it. Now for the stuff that I do like, which is the endless customizability and the myriad of features. To this day, Samsung is still one of the few Android manufacturers to let you decide where you want your back and multitasking buttons. Do you want it on the left or do you want it on the right? It is completely up to you. Or the Eye Comfort Shield, which is the equivalent of Apple's True Tone, making it easier on your eyes when using the phone in the dark. And a little feature that was introduced since the Note 9 that I really enjoy is the ability to take pictures using the S Pen. Meaning that whenever I'm, say, with family, for example, I don't have to time anything or wait for the phone to capture. All I have to do is put my phone on a tripod, aim the camera, take the S Pen out, and hit this little button right here, and there you go. It doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but it just makes things so much more convenient when actually using the phone on a day-to-day basis. This one might be old news by now, similar to the S Pen that I was talking about, but Google Discovery is such a godsend on Samsung's phones. This was added into One UI 3 with the S21s, but as someone who's previously used a Galaxy S10, this feels like a breath of fresh air to me. The reason I mention that is because even though Samsung updated the S10 with One UI 4, they never added this feature to anything older than the S21. So if you have a Note 20 or older, you're out of luck. At least if you want to stick to the default launcher. The final good thing about the software is not really necessarily the software itself, but rather the software updates. Samsung has been very good at this for a while, delivering every monthly update consistently, with the cherry on top being the entire S23 lineup will get updates up until 2027, which is honestly nothing short of amazing. Not as good as the S24 is getting updates till 2031, but still plenty good for most people, and certainly an improvement over the mediocre 2 years that Samsung used to give even with their older flagships. When I first got this phone, the battery life was nothing short of incredible. Even with 120Hz on, I still got over 9.5 hours of active screen on time. I even felt like testing it at 60Hz just to see how long I can get this thing to last before having the charge, and when I did that, I got an extra hour of battery life on top of that. And 1 year later, it's still very impressive with me getting a little over 8 hours of screen on time. When using this phone, the battery life never disappoints me, especially when you combine that with pretty fast 25-watt fast charging that fully charges this phone in around 70 minutes from 0 to 100%. This thing is an incredible battery monster that you should never worry about causing you problems. So final verdict time. Do I still recommend an S23 Ultra? And the answer to that question is a resounding yes. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I start to realize that the S23s are the only older Samsung flagships that just make sense to buy. The S10s are pretty good, but are no longer getting major software updates. The S20s are massive improvements over the S10s, but are no longer supported either. The S21s and S22s fix that by adding 4 years of software updates, so They'll get updates until 2025 and 2026 respectively, but the battery life on them isn't very good, and they have thermal issues because of the very inefficient chipsets powering them, not to mention that they all have Exynos chipsets, which are even worse than their Snapdragon counterparts, so you'll have an even less ideal experience depending on what region you're in. But the S23s have none of these issues. They all have the same Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 regardless of what region you're in, a trend that the S24 lineup failed to continue. The battery life on them is straight up incredible, to the point where even the normal S23 is outlasting the full-size S22 Ultra. That, and just being newer phones, means that they have the added benefit of even better cameras, faster performance, and they'll get updates for even longer. So in my opinion, the lowest you need to go if you want a good 2024 or 2025 Samsung flagship experience is the S23 lineup. Yes, it's going to be a bit pricey, but it's definitely worth it, especially if you want to keep your phone for a couple of years. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.